Hey everybody, Ron here. Originally I planned on doing a flip through the PDF, but OBS was giving me a hard time with the audio, and I had all kinds of crackles in the audio, so I decided that I was going to just do this overview the old-fashioned way, just audio only, maybe showing some pictures. But anyway, this is about how to make a Fantasy Sandbox by Rob Conley. He recently kickstarted it in late 2023. It's coming out early 2024. It is a tabletop role-playing supplement compatible with all rules and additions based on the original 1974 role-playing game, if you know what I'm saying. What this supplement does is gives you a process on how to make a fantasy sandbox, to make your fantasy worlds have verisimilitude, and also empowers you to improvise in the best way possible because you have this bag of tricks already prepared. And I find that fascinating. So I'm going to go through this a little bit. He says in the introduction, one of my favorite things to do with tabletop RPGs is create interesting places with interesting situations and then let the players trash the setting in pursuit of adventure, which is a whole lot of fun for me. My focus is not to create any type of narrative. Rather, I focus on helping my players experience living their characters' lives while adventuring. It's called a sandbox campaign because, like in life, the players are free to do anything the characters can do within the campaign setting. I agree with that statement, and that's something that I look forward to in the game. I have mentioned it before, but right now I'm running a 2-player Shadow Dark game that is sword and sorcery, inspired by Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. My campaign is titled Exile and Thief and Obsidia campaign. Obsidia is my fantasy campaign setting. I wish I would have had the supplement when I started, but I still have it here. And although, one thing I should mention, this is not out yet. It is coming out in 2024, but I was a Kickstarter backer, so I have a draft version of the book. Right now, it looks like it's going to be about 170 pages or so when it comes out. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty reasonable price. He talks about creating the bag of stuff, which is all the things that players are likely to interact with as they undertake adventures in your world. Then he goes through the process, and this process is 33 steps. So I think it's pretty detailed. It talks about sketching a world, a continent map on one page, writing one page of background for each region. And let me tell you something about this. This is some advice I really appreciate because players have short attention spans. You can't get them to read anything more than a page these days. If I can't, well, that's not true. Some folks are really into reading all that stuff. And honestly, the world building is largely an experiment and activity for my enjoyment. But when it comes down to giving information to the players, I need to keep it short and to the point. And I think a page is reasonable. If you have a player or players that are not willing to read even a page of material, whether that page isn't like 6-point font or something like that, then I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you shouldn't really be gaming with those folks or just find some other game to play if this is not their cup of tea. Some other steps he talks about: drawing various aspects of the geography, deciding on where to put population locales and layers and ruins and all that kind of stuff. And what I love about his process here, and when it comes to describing things, like aside from names, he's talking about brief descriptions, like a paragraph or less, which I think is nice. It's a bite-sized piece of information for the game master, and what you can do with that is you can expand upon it because you don't know what is going to happen in the campaign. I mean, that's the whole point of running a fantasy sandbox campaign. You don't know where it's going to go. So that's pretty cool. And it continues on talking about picking 4 to 6 most important population locales and draw a quarter-page sketch map of the settlement. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of the steps because there's 33 steps, and I'll leave those for you to discover when you purchase the book. And then he gets into the process in detail. And the nice thing about the process in detail is he gives lots of real-world example. He takes from Earth geography and climate and weather. He also gives an example throughout the book, a detailed example of his Black Marsh setting. I really appreciate that because not only is the book useful just kind of reading, but like actually seeing an example in the pages of the book really helps me wrap my head around these things. So he goes into the steps and details, the geography, the history and the main campaign, the campaign map, creatures and human landscape, places, locales, regional background and history. And it's funny because his example background is over a page, but he's been running that setting, I'm sure, for years and years. So it might be hard to summarize it in less than a page. So I give him some slack on that. Talks about describing the geography. I can't wait for the final book to see all of the art. So it looks like it's going to be a black and white interior with a black and white art. He has some stat blocks in here for treasure and whatnot, and I think some monsters too. And through each step, as he details the step, he also explains his reasoning on why these things are important, and then he has a detailed example. For example, step 21 is say to look at your notes and come up with 2 to 4 plots that tie one or more locales together. Write a paragraph or 2 on each. There you go, a paragraph again. And then it says plots are not a script, but rather a plan. Consider them a what-if so you can better prepare for what players may be doing. You should fully expect to adapt, change, or discard your plots as the player's choices and luck alter the circumstances of the campaign. And then gives one example, the Fortress of the Lich Lord, and then the Threat of the Suagan, and the Empire of Po, and the Baron and the Sheriff, the Dwarf of the South Point. So these are all the plots that in his example campaign are the plots that he focuses on giving the example of in the step 21. And that's the kind of thing to expect in the book. It talks about general encounters. And the book goes on like this. Lots of great stuff. It talks about the home base because for a Fantasy Sandbox campaign, you need a home base for the party. Maybe have a safe haven, a base of operations. And he has some charts, like, for example, profession chart talking about gives the value of these different professions and the fantasy demographics for the area. You can get this information from other places too, but it's nice that it's here. And, make a setting your own. You don't have to go with the charts and graphs that he has here. I mean, you could pull stuff from other sources. You folks know that there's dozens, hundreds of sources for fantasy campaigns that you can pull from. So, go wild. But I love this kind of stuff. And then he has the final town map of the home base. So by this point in time, it's a pretty nice detail of the home base, which is great. That gives you lots of potential gaming material. Of course, he talks about detailing important NPCs. NPCs, I believe, are the heart of any campaign world. Of course, NPCs take a back seat to the players and their agency, but the NPCs bring the setting alive. And so I love that he gets into that here in the book. He talks about making a rumor chart and a random encounter chart. And of course, those things are key elements in a sandbox because you got to give the players some potential story hook because you never know what's going to hook them. Different players have different motivations, even aside from their characters. So you got to hook both the characters and the players. And so that's a nice thing to have. And then he goes into, he has appendices in the book. He has links to many of the resources like a Magical Society, Medieval Society book, fantasy demographics. There are 2 pages of links that you can go to in the book. So this is a PDF. It's going to be a physical book, of course. Talks about mapping with hexes and the appendices. He details how he made the Black Marsh setting, which is the Sandbox setting that he runs a game in and is a published work that he has. And then finally, he talks about traveling. And this is the thing that really got my attention because he talked about on Tinkar's YouTube channel and other places about taking the journey system from the Run and Ring and kind of simplifying it for old school fantasy play. But he does more than that. It's not just for overland travel. He takes it and applies it to voyages over seas and oceans and also trips in the city. I find this fascinating. So basically what it boils down to is you generate a number of encounters based on the length of the travel. Journeys or voyages have lengths measured in days, weeks, and months. Trips, basically minutes, half hours, and hours, which makes sense, right? It's ingenious. I never would have thought of that. So you can randomly determine the initial circumstances, whether it's bad, neutral, or good. And then you roll for the significance. You have minor, major, or exceptional significance encounters. And then, you roll 2d6 and you get encounters. You get random encounters, like nice things like opportunities to resupply or obstacles or inclement weather and that kind of stuff. Enemy about or unexpected meeting. Yeah. And so this is obviously, in my opinion, inspired from the One Ring, which is what he said, because I recognize a lot of these types of encounters from that journey's chart. I am glad to see this in an old school fantasy form that makes it easier for me to use. So that is the book. That's an overview of it. I can't wait to get the final PDF and the physical copy. I will let you folks know when it's going to come out so that you can get your hands on it as well. And also, I am interviewing Rob soon. You will see that on the YouTube channel and on the podcast feed. Thank you, folks, for sticking around and watching this video, listening to this podcast. And until next time, see you later.